Commissioner Mills. Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Present.
Commissioner Sauve.
Here.
Commissioner Abrams. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Commissioner Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
We have a quorum of 7 members. A reminder to the commission that it takes 6 affirmative votes to advance a petition.
All right. We are on to item number 3, which is the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We do not have minutes tonight, so we're going to skip over item 4 and move on to item 5, which is reports from city administration, city council, planning manager, commissioner officers, and et cetera. So why don't we start with city council, Commissioner Dish, or council member Dish, excuse me.
I'm both. So last night on first reading, you're all just nodding because you're all so excited. Council passed the parking revisions, UDC amendments to parking. Council also passed the UDC amendments regarding marijuana facilities, street trees, and trees in the right-of-way. I think I've got all those right. Those were grouped together. And I think that's all that's specifically relevant to planning, but I know Mr. Leonard will provide more information if I've left anything out.
Just one note, there was an amendment to the proposed marijuana changes that were proffered by the full planning commission. The council modified them to specifically provide for curbside service for provisioning centers, retailers, and micro businesses. Just as a bit of background, a lot of that has been occurring through COVID, like a lot of businesses had been adapting. And so the council did make that small change to it and wanted to share that with the commission as well. And that's my only report.
Mr. Nolet, anything else in terms of your report? You're good. Okay. Anybody else, commissioner officers or liaisons to report? Anybody? Not seeing anyone. Oh, no, Commissioner Lee, go ahead.
Okay, just from Transportation Commission last month, we went over the parks plan. They presented it, just kind of talked about continuity in our parks. And we really talked about emphasizing connectivity of ways to get between recreation and, again, creating more, again, connectivity. So just wanted to say they wanted us more representation in the comprehensive planning efforts, even though the pros plan, I think, was updated actually relatively recently, but just wanted to make sure that we're coordinating with the parks and have greater voice. So just wanted to give that update. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All righty, we are on to item number 6, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed on the public hearing for tonight. We'll first call on people who are here, and then we'll move to people that are virtual. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name for those who are accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anybody present in the audience here that would like to begin? Mr. Garber.
Thank you, Chair Gibb Randall. Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. I don't know if any of you were at the Home Electrification Expo at the Farmers Market last Friday. The new air source heat pump systems are really impressive in terms of both heating capacity and efficiency. One big advance is the inverter-driven compressor, which constantly changes speed to match outdoor temperature to indoor heat demand. These systems now can run at full heating capacity down to 5 degrees. Colder than that, it may fall short of your thermostat setting by a few degrees, say 70 instead of 72. But gas furnaces also struggle at sub-zero temperatures. And heat pump efficiency is unbelievable. The COPs, or coefficients of performance, are now between 2 and 3 when it's cold outside. The COP is energy produced divided by energy used. A COP of 3 means that the heat pump is 300% efficient. Now, how can a device create 3 times the energy it consumes? That seems to go against the first law of thermodynamics, which you'll remember from high school physics, states that energy can't be created or destroyed. But the second law of thermodynamics states that any system not in equilibrium, not at maximum entropy, such as the difference between inside and outside temperatures, can be made to do useful work. The converse also holds. A heat pump takes the heat energy in the cold space and by adding work moves it to a hot space, making it hotter. The work in this case employs electricity to compress a gas, which raises the temperature. That's why heat pumps are more than 3 times as efficient as gas furnaces. Even the best gas furnace falls short of 100% efficiency because some heat is always lost in the system. Furnaces use a chemical reaction to heat air, which is very thermodynamically inefficient. You don't gain energy from burning fossil fuels. You just use the solar energy stored in ancient plant matter, which we call oil, gas, or coal. Breaking their chemical bonds releases heat. This is now a stupid way to heat buildings. Because fossil fuels are abundant and have a high energy density, it's still fairly cheap to pull them out of the ground, pump them through pipelines, and burn them. But your utility bills don't take into account carbon's terrible social cost. The burning of fossil fuels is overwhelming the Earth's systems for cycling carbon, cooking the planet, leading to droughts, flooding, collapse of food systems, mass migration, mass extinction. Poor communities in the global south pay most of this cost. You don't have to love the physics of heat pumps, as I do, to appreciate their clean energy potential and their ridiculous efficiency. The forced air gas furnace is a technology that no longer has any role to play in residential new construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely on an item that is not on the agenda? Mr. Leonard, do you see anybody?
Nope.
Okay. Alrighty, we'll move on to item number 7, which is public hearings for the next business meeting.
For the August 3rd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, we have 3 new public hearings scheduled. First is 2424 East Stadium Boulevard. This is the University Inn residential site plan for City Planning Commission approval. A proposal to construct a 4-story residential building totaling 215,000 square feet and housing 185 dwelling units. Next, 2502 Packard Street, the George site plan for City Planning Commission approval. This is a proposal to convert 23,462 square feet of retail space on the ground floor to 42 residential units. And third, 1301 Morningside Drive, a special exception use permit for City Planning Commission approval, a request for a child care center for up to 40 children and 10 caregivers in the existing building with a site plan to show existing conditions.
All right, thank you. We will now move on to item number 8, which is regular business. I will introduce the petition by reading what's on the agenda here. We have the Village of Ann Arbor site plan and rezoning to R4A, multiple family dwelling zoning for city council approval. The petitioner proposes to construct 561 dwelling units on approximately 65 acres at 16880 Duvarn Road. Units include owner-occupied and rental units. Access is proposed from Pontiac Trail, Duvarn Road, and Leslie Park. Stormwater detention is proposed on site. The project includes a wetland use permit for a 0.03 acre wetland, a wetland impact. Construction is currently proposed to take place in 2 phases, and the staff recommendation is postponement. So we will start first with a petitioner presentation for up to 10 minutes, and then we'll have staff presentation after that.
Thank you very much. Is it okay if I take this off, or should I be?
It's a,
I'm sorry?
Please leave the mask on.
Okay, I want to be respectful, thank you. Hello, Tim Loughran, Robertson Homes, 6905 Telegraph Road. Good to see you. Before I begin, I want to thank you. I'm a fellow planning commissioner, and I know it's a thankless job, so thank you for your time tonight. We've got Darren Newbecker, who's the man behind the scenes, going to be moving forward the slide deck, so I'll tell him to move forward when we get to that point. We're very excited to be here. It's been a very long road. We've been working on this project for at least 3 years. There have been people before us who haven't been able to figure it out. We actually were on it and we walked away as well. But we believe we have a plan that really works. We're excited about it, and we're happy to be here to present to you today. So, Darren, if you can move forward. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just go through some of the details and then certainly show you some of the site plans, the elevations, and then what I'm really excited about is having a discussion with you. And I know you've all sort of seen it in different iterations in the past. So project summary, essentially it's a village. We called it a village because it's a village. There's multiple types of housing products, really for all stages of life. We think that's very important. There's a lot of entry points for price points into the community, which we believe is very important, particularly in this part of the city. It is 58 acres. That's the net. It's about 67 total. That includes the former landfill, which I'll get to in a minute. There's about 8 to 10 acres of landfill on the site, former City of Ann Arbor landfill. Master plan designation shows 7 to 10 units per acre, so we're right in that band. That is something that has been noticed on this property as far as future density way back when. So it was in the township. Obviously, you saw it when it came in for the annexation. Appreciate that. Went to the city council, and then here we are with the site plan. The number of units is actually 484. I know it's a little bit different on the agenda, but 484 is what we're proposing as far as our site plan. 164 of those is for sale. 320 of them would be for lease. So the plan types, they're for sale, what we call detached single-family homes and townhomes. Nobody lives on top of each other on our for sale products. We have 2- and 3-story, and then we also have a 2-story highly amenitized apartment component as well, with a very nice clubhouse and pool. Unit sizes range basically from 684 up to 1,850 square feet. So again, that breadth of different options for different buyers and renters, and 1 to 4 bedrooms. Darren, if you can move forward. So some of the highlights. Again, it's really important. We wanted to have multiple entry points so we could serve many different types of buyers and renters looking in this area. We think we've accommodated that. We'll have lots of open space. In fact, 65% of the site is open space. And really what's exciting about this site is there's a neighborhood connection that really doesn't exist today for Leslie Park. We would be creating 2, albeit private roads, but we would be having a public easement, be completely open to the public. We think that is a home run for this. Having access to the Leslie Park, I think, will open it up. We're very excited. We have a park contribution that we hope can bring Leslie Park up in terms of the quality there. But right now, the only access through it is to the neighborhood to the south, Devon on the park. So that, I believe, is a very big public benefit of our project. Very walkable. We have about a mile, more than a mile of bike paths and sidewalks that we're putting into this project. It's very important to us to have that connectivity. Again, appropriate mix of residential land uses. We have several different options that really will meet the target market buyers and renters. It is a reclamation of a previous landfill. I want to get into that in just a minute here. But it was a previous landfill. We will be basically reclaiming that and bringing it back to life. That area would be fully treed. That is part of our open space. Really, we've talked to Eagle, we've talked to many consultants. It does not make sense to tear that out and move it somewhere else. It makes sense to keep it as an open, treed amenity for the project. Family-oriented plans, high-quality homes, and shameless self-promotion. We are joint venturing this with DTN. Our organizations have been together. We've consisted of over 100 years combined of experience, and I think that's very important. You've got somebody here that will have a successful project and will bring the project forward. Darian? So just quickly on us, and I'll blow through this, but we built a lot of homes in the last 75 years. We do not build out in the cornfield. That's not what we like to do. We like to look for very walkable communities, something that's interesting, something where we can make an impact. We are not, and I'm not going to bash other builders, but we're not them. And this is exactly what I'll show you who we are. Right now, we've got about 1,600 homes in the pipeline. Things, it's up and down in the housing market, but we're very gung-ho about this site in particular. And again, we bring life to infill corridors, which is exactly what we're talking about. Next slide, Darren. DTN, they've been around a long time as well. They've got a lot of units, and you can read everything about them. We're very happy to have them as a partner. Next slide. So this is a context plan. This really shows where we fit into the overall neighborhood. Frankly, the reason why it's 7 to 10 on the master plan is because everything around us is 7 to 10. Everything you see there is R4A. We've got PUD to the north, but of course that is developed as a similar type of product. I think those are mostly stacked units, but you've got R4A everywhere around us. So our request is not inconsistent with the master plan. We believe we're a conforming plan. We're not asking for any deviations. We're coming to you to basically meet your master plan to the T. So I want to make that clear that we believe we're a conforming plan with what we're about to show you. So that is the plan as it sits. You can see there's a lot of open space. There's a wetland complex as you come in off of Pontiac Trail. From the west, on Duvarn, we have an entrance there as well. There's open space there. Our plan is for a future phase to come back to you when we have the other parcels that you've already actually seen, improved the two 5.7 acres, that little box to the bottom left. And we'd come back in for a future phase with those parcels. But that is the project, and we believe it fits in like a glove in this area. So that shows the access to Leslie Park. It shows Olson Park to the north. This is, I think, this really identifies how we're going to connect to the two parks, which is very important. Next slide, Darren. This is the site plan, just getting into it a little bit more. The 4 lease apartment units are on basically the south side of that road. There's a few that are above that. You can see that, but generally speaking, the 4 lease on the south side, that's where the clubhouse is. The clubhouse actually will be open to the for sale units as part of their HOA dues. We think that's very important. We sized it appropriately for that. And we think that that's a great amenity for this overall village concept. Everything north of that road that gets you from Pontiac Trail to Leslie Park, everything north of there, those are the townhomes, the residential townhomes. There are 2-story and 3-story units. The 2-story units, as Darren's kind of circling right there, those are really attached single-family homes. They're 1,850 square feet, 4 bedrooms. I mean, that is a single-family home. Things are not attainable today. Everybody knows that. This is one way where we can provide attainable single-family housing. And then the other units, you can see those there. Those are the 3-story. We have single car and 2-car. Every single home, including the apartments in this community, have at least 1 car attached, garage, 1 car parking. Some have 2-car as well. Darian, if you could, actually, before you move on, Darian, you can go back real quick, sorry. You can see that blob to the top, kind of middle right. That is a landfill. So that, just a quick history on this, I'll give you Cliff Notes. Back in the 40s and 50s, that was the Ann Arbor City dump site. That particular location right there, that was everything. That was household waste, which is really not buildable. It was before that a mining operation, so that's how it became a hole to be able to fill in with garbage, if you will. So there is a lot in that area. It looks treed, it's beautiful, we're not touching it. So that is, I think, a very important component of the plan. To the left of that, where we are proposing units as well, that was also part of the mining operation. There's about 20 to 30 feet of fill, construction fill there. It is not household waste, but it is a major challenge to develop on that. So that is why this site, that's why 65 acres has been sitting in your city this long. It's a lot to deal with, a lot of cost to deal with. And because of the landfill, there's also methane, which of course you could expect, and we have to deal with that with the methane trench, which our consultant who's on Zoom, if he needs to discuss, SME has helped us design that along with Atwell, our engineer. Moving on, please. This is the what I feel are the public benefits. Did you want me to stop? I'd like to continue if I could.
How about we move on to your public benefits, since that's something I think we're going to be talking about tonight, but then you wrap it up.
Okay.
After that.
Makes sense. So this is what I consider the public benefits map. I think we have a lot going on with this project. Again, I want to stress we believe we're a conforming plan. But I also want to stress that we think this is a very important site to the city. We recognize it. We know how important this site is. We know we have a lot of opportunities to create a very special project, and that is what we are presenting tonight. Over a mile of bike and pedestrian paths. That takes you from Olson Park to Leslie Park. It's all open to the public and maintained by our association. 65% open space. It recycles the contaminated landfill property. It's been sitting there for decades and decades and decades. We are bringing this whole area back to life. All electric ready and energy efficient appliances. New public connection to Leslie Park, as I mentioned. Annual tax revenue north of $3 million. Multiple entry points, which, again, I can't stress that enough. We think that that is a very important. I'd love to show you the elevations if we have time to do that. We will have over 500, and actually farther north of 500, but over 500 electric vehicle charging stations. That's very important. Each unit will be pre-wired for that, and then we'll also have 36 EV stations that can be used by the public guests of the residents. We have worked with the ATA on putting a bus stop along Pontiac Trail, which I believe is very important. Wetland preservation, we're hardly touching any of it. It's very hard to develop a site today with wetlands and not have any impact. We've got to get the road through. That's it. We're not blowing out any other wetlands. I think that's very important. You can see it's really beautiful to the west there, which will be a great entrance into the project. And then we're proposing, and again, we see this as a conforming plan, but we are proposing to do solar panels on the clubhouse and then solar streetlights throughout. So this is important. I know it's important to the city. It's important to us to do that here. Those are the public benefits that we see in this project. I'd be happy to run through the rest, but of course, I want to answer all your questions as well.
Yep, and we'll ask questions and,
Of course.
And give you a chance. But let's move on to the staff version of things and see if there's anything that you would want to add to the report.
Yes, I'd like to add a couple items. One, I wanted to reinforce what the petitioner said about the comprehensive plan land use element, which recommends a density of 7 to 10 dwelling units per acre. Prior to the city approving that comprehensive plan, we were witnessing a lot of sites in this part of town being developed for low-density single-family, which we felt limited diversity of housing types. It limited more affordable housing types, and so we wanted to, and it didn't support transit. So three of the main reasons why we are recommending densities in that range is that we believe it will encourage the efficient use of land, it will encourage a diversity of housing types, and it will support transit. The developer is proposing a density that is within that range. The second thing I wanted to just briefly touch upon is the traffic impacts associated with this project. The most significant area of concern was the Pontiac Trail Barton intersection. Also, Pontiac Trail Duvarn was impacted. We did recently complete a study called the Lower Town Area Mobility Study, which looked at the Lower Town area as well as the Pontiac Trail corridor all the way past Duvarn. And that study did indicate that the intersection of Pontiac Trail and Duvarn could accommodate a compact urban roundabout, which could go a long way in reducing catastrophic incidences at that intersection, as well as accommodate large volumes of traffic. However, that study indicated that the intersection of Pontiac Trail and Barton was very limited. Pontiac Trail is one of the oldest streets in Ann Arbor. It is a very limited amount of right-of-way. And And so it did not look appropriate for an urban roundabout. What's more, a roundabout can significantly compromise the ability for non-motorized users to get through an intersection like that, particularly at high-volume periods. And so I did want to mention that. We do have Luke Liu, the city's transportation engineer who worked in this project, available to answer questions that you might have tonight. I believe the petitioner also has a representative who was involved with providing the traffic study. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions associated with that. I also wanted to mention that, as the petitioner alluded to, the petitioner is in the process of acquiring about 11.6 acres at the very southwest corner of their site, just south of the wetland area. It's our understanding that they intend to add that property to the parcel and will be working on an updated site plan in the near future. So we may be seeing something that looks different than this over the next few months. That's pretty much what I wanted to add before the staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the proposed R4A zoning and site plan be postponed to allow the petitioner an opportunity to address a number of site issues related to transportation, engineering, solid waste, and brownfield design. Staff recommends the wetland use permit be postponed to provide the petitioner an opportunity to address a number of site issues related to transportation, engineering, solid waste, and brownfield design.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we will move on now to the public hearing, and then after that, we'll get into discussion. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes, and we'll call on individuals present to address the commission first, and then we'll move into the remote world. To speak during this public hearing remotely, press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anybody in the room that would like to begin? Mr. Garber.
Thank you again, Chair Gib Randall, Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. Yeah, there are things to like about this project, but the petitioner just went through them. The Energy Commission last Tuesday adopted a resolution urging full electrification at the village. The resolve clauses read, resolved that the Ann Arbor Energy Commission urges the Planning Commission and City Council to encourage all buildings in the village to be constructed with fully electric appliances for space and water heating and for cooking, and resolved that the appliances for heating shall be electric heat pumps utilizing ground or air sources of ambient heat with an efficiency rating of SEER 18 or higher, end quote. This passed unanimously. Obviously, your role as planning commissioners is to interpret and apply the zoning code, not energy policy, but I hope you take the village's climate impact into account tonight. The electrification measures listed in the staff report are minimal. It's good that there will be electric cooking, assuming it's induction, not resistance. The electric dryers should be heat pump dryers, which are more efficient than gas, not electric resistance dryers, which are less. Mr. Loughran just mentioned that the project will be all electric ready. I think you need to look critically at that claim. First of all new homes have 220 volt panels. There's nothing special about adding a plug. Switching from a gas furnace to a heat pump is not a matter of just plugging one in. These homes will not be electrification ready. For a ductless or mini split system, which is by far the most efficient, you have to run refrigerant from the central heat pump compressor to heads in most rooms in the house and then back, which is an expensive retrofit. You could instead force the hot air through the existing ductwork using the gas furnace blower, but that's much less efficient and more costly to run and requires gas backup. The reality is that no one is going to retrofit a home that has brand-new gas infrastructure. Electric should be built in from the start. Question about parking. The site plan's parking chart, very first page, shows 1,490 total parking spaces. That breaks down to roughly 2.5 spaces per apartment unit and 4 spaces per townhome. That would be excessive. The staff report subtracts the 617 driveway spots, leaving the project with 874 spaces, about 90 spaces short of the minimum. So my question is, which is it? The developer is reporting 1,490 spaces, but staff is only counting 874 of these. It sounds like staff doesn't consider the driveway spots to be parking, but that the petitioner does. I see these tandem spaces in use all around town. Probably there's a reason not to count them here, but I don't immediately see it. Anyway, just a question. Thank you for considering these comments.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the queue remotely? Or is anybody else? No?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 194. You can unmute yourself using *6 and address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Rita Mitchell calling. I live at 621 5th Street, and I'm calling to comment on the villages. My concern is very much as described by Mr. Garber, which is a concern that we are moving forward in a climate emergency. And I'm really glad that the planning commissioners have the expertise that you do as you're participating on this commission, because you understand the need for us to move toward a clean, renewable energy future. And we should be asking the developer to use geothermal, air source heat pumps, and solar panels as much as possible to move this project forward in a way that will have us being a participant in the clean energy future, so that retrofits are not required. We need to do it right the first time. Please move forward in that way, and that's my recommendation for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 245. You can press *6 to unmute your phone and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hello. Hello, my name is Kathleen Murphy. I live at 315 Linda Vista Street in Ward 5. I think, as the 2 previous speakers said, that it is important that these homes be built, but that they be built in accordance with the A20 and city guidelines to reach carbon neutrality by 2030. If these homes are powered by gas, that ignores the city and A20 guidelines. It locks in fossil fuel use for the rest of the century in these homes. Instead, I believe that the energy in these new homes and apartments should be based on electrification, either via air source heat pumps or geothermal. As was also stated last week, Tuesday, the Energy Commission unanimously passed a resolution asking Planning Commission to encourage the village of Ann Arbor to go all out for electrification. We need to use non-fossil fuel sources as we prepare for a future with a healthy climate, not one that is doomed by the continued dependence on fossil fuels. This large-scale building project is a tremendous opportunity to put our values to the test by getting this large building project to use renewable sources of energy from its inception. We have to take the climate crisis seriously, and this would be a tremendous step forward in doing that. Please make acceptance of this project contingent on using renewable energy sources. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you.
No other speakers are indicated.
All right. righty. I'm assuming also we got lots of communications as linked with our agenda too. I hope folks have had a chance to be able to look at those. All righty, I will read the proposed motions. Since there's two of them, one that's separate for the wetland permit. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Village of Ann Arbor R4A zoning site plan development agreement, subject to petitioner obtaining a variance for the maximum front setback along Duvarin Road and a variance for not meeting the minimum parking requirement. And the second motion is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Village of Ann Arbor wetland use permit to allow filling and mitigation of 1,300 square feet of wetland disturbance and on-site mitigation. Okay, so those are the motions moved by Commissioner Dish, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. All righty, we are in discussion of the proposed motions. Commissioner Weich.
So my question is, how do we want to treat the staff recommendation of postponement of this?
My sense is that we would still have this opportunity to discuss.
Okay.
And especially for us to be able to have a chance to absorb and understand a big, complicated project.
Sure.
And that we would then decide whether we agree with the postponement or not, and then, and go from there. But it seems like an opportunity for us to be able to have a chance to chew on it a while. So
And
given
so
that,
then
are there?
Okay, so then a follow-up. So if we do vote to postpone it, will the whole process repeat? That is to say, the petitioner would come back, re-present, we'd have another public hearing, and then we would have another conversation.
That would be my guess, yes.
Okay,
And we
I
might
just
come up with
wanted to make
some
sure.
things for them to do some further exploration on, or, things like that, to be able to, yeah.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, but I will defer to someone else.
Anybody else want to be number two? Commissioner Dish.
I would like to talk about parking. No, not parking, I'm sorry. Traffic, not the same thing. Sometimes it feels the same. Traffic and electrification. And I actually have a question for Mr. Liu, because we were invited, we could speak with him. Yeah, so Mr. Liu, I would like to ask you, what can we do at Pontiac and Barton? We've heard that we could do a compact roundabout at Pontiac and Duvarin, and I'd love to talk to Mr. Laughlin about that, but I haven't heard any remedy proposed at all for Pontiac and Barton, and I understand that we will not put a roundabout there, and I agree, I concur. But we've got to do something, because to increase traffic at that already horrible intersection is just, it's not safe for bicyclists and pedestrians. So, yeah, thanks, Mr. Liu.
Good evening. Yes, as you mentioned, the intersection at Barton Pontiac Trail, that's very limited by the available right-of-way we have there. We did look into the possibility of constructing a roundabout there, but there is the concern with residents really in close distance to the intersection. And also when we conducted public meetings as part of the Lower Town study, we got a lot of feedback from the residents nearby and from other users who would walk the intersection to the school close to that location as preferring to maintain the existing traffic signal there. So really in terms of mitigating the congestion, well, especially in the morning and evening peak hours, more so pronounced in the morning peak, we really have to step out of the box. The traditional means of roundabout, addition of travel lanes, those are simply cannot be installed at this intersection. And really what's left would be to look at travel demand. if we cannot really increase more on the supply side, then travel demand management is really the direction we want to pursue. So if users can shift their mode of travel to be more in the active modes, taking buses, riding bicycles, or walk if it's within reasonable distance, that's going to really solve the problem quite a bit. Or if users still prefer to continue driving private vehicles, then the demand management strategy would be to spread out the peak so that we do not have as heavy a demand during the peak period, and rather shift a portion of that demand into the off period. That's going to be the solution.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess we can ask corporations in Ann Arbor to adopt staggered start times so that much of the traffic that's in that intersection is commuter traffic. And so I think we can do a better job providing timelier buses. That corridor is served only twice an hour by a bus, which is just not very practical. People aren't going to make the choice to, especially if they're going further than Blake Transit and have to make a transfer, they're not going to choose to take a bus, which will take them over an hour when they could, do their car. So we really need more frequent bus service there. We need better protection for bike use. I bike Pontiac all fall to the university, and I'm terrified. And I'm also dodging trash cans, trash, and glass, none of which I want to hit on my ride to school. So all of that, I agree that we could do a lot by addressing those. Okay, so Mr. Laughlin, I appreciate your commitment to develop infill in cities. And because you have that commitment, I know that you understand the urgency that we in Ann Arbor feel about our carbon neutrality goals. And, I want to be frank with you. I am under a lot of limitations as a council member. We don't have the ability to mandate that your project be all electric, but we have strong community preferences in that direction. And those preferences are all the more urgent given what's happening at the federal level. It really is up to states and cities now to take the bigger leap. And as many of our residents are as educated as Mr. Garber is about the alternatives, and they have installed them in their own homes, and they are aware that the technology is getting better and more efficient. They're also aware of the social costs of carbon, and those are the costs for their children and their grandchildren. So I just want to express a very strong preference that you choose an electrification plan that actually does something to reduce emissions, because what you are proposing here is, I believe, as Mr. Garber said, it's short of that. And so I would invite you to consider that and to let us know how we can help you make sense of that. And I also then, so I can only say all those things. I can't ask you to give me a response. I just put them out there. It's hard for me. I'm so upset about what happened last week that it's hard for me to even speak about this. I feel so strongly about it. But the other thing is I wondered if you'd thought about how you might help us mitigate traffic at the Pontiac-Duvarin intersection. As I know you know, there is not even a stop sign there. And so we have folks streaming in off of 23 and nothing stops them until they hit the infamous Pontiac-Barton intersection. So how might we help us build a roundabout at that intersection? I think it would mean a lot. That would be a huge community benefit and a big relief to those folks who live along Pontiac, who just in the morning peak, they can't pull out of their housing association. So that's my question to you. That was my plea to you and followed up by a question.
And those two two items that I think are the biggest items for us to discuss. So I'll hit the traffic first. From our standpoint, you have an intersection that's, pretty much failing. It's a poor intersection. It has been. It'll get worse with the other communities that are building up around us. It's already an existing issue, if you will, that the city has. And the city does have this particular 60 acres, 70 acres slated for 10 units per acre. So you sort of have this dichotomy of you're encouraging more residents, which ostensibly means more traffic, yet you have this existing intersection. We know it's bad. We know from the very beginning we knew this would be a topic of discussion. I don't know what the solution is. I agree with Mr. Liu and everything he said. We've had conversations about this. I don't think there's a magic bullet, if you will, to resolve it. We're willing to have those discussions. We recognize, in fact, our traffic report, if you look at it, on the future conditions, we'd be increasing traffic at that intersection about 7%. So we recognize that. That's a pretty definable number. It's not double. It's not triple. I mean, it's a pretty manageable increase. It's already a bad intersection. So we are willing to have those conversations about how we can work together there. It is off-site, so we don't have any ability to fix it ourselves. But I think we're willing to have those conversations, moving forward. Obviously, development agreement. That's about really all I can commit or say to that, but we recognize it, and I think we're willing to work with you. In regard to reducing emissions, so I want to first say that we do really appreciate this is not lip service. We really appreciate what you're trying to do with your policies. I've read it several times. We have a team behind me that has been focused on this. So it is very important to us. These things that we're offering, we can argue about all electric ready and what that means, and I'm happy to have those conversations. But this is above and beyond what we would normally do. Now, we do build 20% above building code for energy efficiency. So we already do build a better product, if you will. But having, say, all electric ready, I mean, we're proposing electric cooking appliances. Yes, induction. We're willing to there's probably some residents that won't buy in here because of that. That's fine. This is important. We're going to do that. Really, the only appliance that we're talking about gas is the furnace. And I want to be very clear on why we're proposing having an all-electric ready, which would include gas furnaces. I'm not an expert on this. I don't claim to be. I've done a lot of research, but I have a team behind me that's a lot smarter than me. We've worked with a lot of consultants, numerous consultants, building efficiency experts. We've talked to all of the manufacturers. We've joined other groups in other northern climates like Minnesota, Wisconsin. We've actually done a lot of legwork. I want you to understand that. Our main concern is the technology isn't there yet. And I know it's getting better. I realize that. And I know it's getting better every day. I understand that too. From our standpoint, our fear, and I'll just share exactly what it is. It's not the additional cost per se per unit to have a heat pump. That is a factor, and we're trying to be attainable. I think that's important to be attainable here. Our real concern is, for the for sale buyers, okay, their utilities will be higher in the near term. We will disclose that. I'm sure they'll buy and not have a problem. It's really, when we talk about our renters, when they see their first year utility bill being 150%, 200% of what it is across the street, we're going to lose them. So that might not be a rational thought, but that is something that we spend a lot of time coming to the conclusion of. Now, we are more than happy to have discussions with whoever we need to on your end to see how we can bridge that concern. But the way we've kind of looked at this is, whatever date that is, that the efficiencies of those units, and by the way, the cost of electricity is cheaper, or gas is cheaper than electricity on a BTU level. So you kind of have that double whammy at this point. That's not to say that electric will come down once we, obviously you get your grid up with renewable resources. That's how we're looking at it. We're looking at it a near term and a midterm, if you will. And we're happy to kind of put more texture on that, but that is what our concern is. Now, if our concern's unvalidated and it's something we can have, maybe we have a subcommittee and we discuss it, we're willing to do that. But, for me to say right now, our future residents in our minds are going to have a 200% increase in their utility bills, however irrational that might be, we're not willing to do that at this point. So I don't know if that gets a little bit to where our thought process is.
I thank you, and I want to let my fellow really smart commissioners follow up or change the subject.
Did somebody raise their hand over there? No. Commissioner Clark.
So I just have a question and kind of a comment on it. So I live very close to the Pontiac Trail, Barton intersection, and I'm curious about the roundabout. And at first, my initial reaction to the roundabout was that's probably not a great idea, but I've actually come around to it, and even talking to two of my immediate neighbors, we were just the other day talking about how much worse the traffic's gotten, and I kind of wonder whether the traffic increase on that intersection, I feel like the people that are, I guess to me, I would rather people living closer and driving less distance and are maybe more cognizant of the fact it's a neighborhood and not in the kind of highway mentality on this site, rather than moving realistically, up to South Lyon or Northville and living there and then speeding through. So I have to say the traffic, I can't really feel like it's up to one developer to address. It doesn't seem like there's a lot to be done there. But I guess I would be curious to know about if it's possible with the roundabout to have a kind of slip design where it'd be possible to have bicyclists maybe bypass it, and the safety. I don't really know anything about the safety elements of that. And I guess my other question would be on that, the right of way. And there was one that somebody mentioned that the size wouldn't be appropriate for an urban roundabout. And I'm curious, I saw one recently that was over by Arbor land area in a neighborhood that I was actually surprised how compact it was. And there was another one nearby too that's quite small. And then the other thing I was just going to comment is I think one of the big things with the traffic is I don't really mind how many cars go past, it's the noise. And the honking, the rear ends, the people yelling and swearing at each other out the window, that all just gets very tiring to live next to. And it used to be that I could have a conversation with my neighbor and we could hear each other. Now we will literally be shouting to each other and we can't hear each other over the traffic. So I guess I'd be curious if there are solutions that would maybe prevent people from speeding up, slowing down, hitting each other, and just keep traffic constant and quiet would be nice, even if not a roundabout. I'm not sure, I'm not an engineer, but yeah, so I guess I'm just curious about if it really is a no-go with the roundabout, especially by Duvaren and Pontiac Trail. That seems like it'd be great, because a stop sign, I can just imagine there'd be more rear-ending, swearing, honking, et cetera. So yeah, and then there was also a comment about the solid waste, and I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on the solid waste challenges there.
Do you want me to hit the solid waste first?
That one was more towards the engineer, but if you want to, yeah.
I could give it a shot, and then maybe if the petitioner wanted to add anything. With regard to solid waste, the petitioner felt very strongly that the owner-occupied townhomes on the northern portion of the site should have private cart service, so that in your garage you'd have a cart for solid waste or garbage, a cart for recycling, and that they could be brought out and picked up by the solid waste trucks. The site proposed some challenges in terms of truck access to go around all of those access drives. And so our solid waste team is working with the petitioner's team to identify a centralized pickup zone for the carts. And so that's the main reason why we're still in conversations with them. For the apartment community, on the south side of the site, there'll be a single trash collection area that includes a compactor. And our solid waste folks have already signed off on that concept. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Jeff did a very good job of that. We did come to a conclusion on the trash carts, on the recycle, that would have been double the carts, and we agreed to do a trash enclosure for the recycle for those for sale homes, but it is very important from a for sale standpoint to have individual cart service. We were able to identify the areas where that would be, where they'd still have adequate access for their trucks, so their garbage trucks aren't in conflict with backing up and that sort of thing. So I think we worked very well with them. I believe they signed off on it, but they do essentially want us to agree that if it doesn't work in the future, we would have areas identified for the trash enclosures if it would have to switch at some point in the future. I don't think we have an issue with that. I think it'll be fine. We do this every community we build townhomes in.
Is this on the garbage recycling piece? Is there anything that anybody else would like to ask about the garbage and recycling piece? I have a feeling that somebody next to me has something to say about that.
If you don't mind.
Before we leave it.
Yeah. So how many service sites are you thinking of for people to drop their carts at?
So each unit, for sale unit, I believe we have 184, whatever that number was, I can't remember on the top of my head. They would have an individual trash cart that they would put in their garage,
Right.
not on pickup days, and then they bring it out in a defined area that's basically open along the curb for the garbage trucks to use on trash day.
Okay, so, but it sounded as if what Mr. Kahan said, and I may have misunderstood you, was that the trucks don't feel that they can service each
Originally, no.
Okay.
We've worked with them to come up with a compromise, a solution where we've moved them to specific areas. It's a little bit farther for the homeowner to wheel it to.
Right, so I'm trying to get at how far is it?
No.
How many of those are there so that it's not a mile for
It's
someone?
not, and I can kind of show on the plans here, but that's not going to help because you can't see it. But we're comfortable with how far they are. It's important to us that it's not very far. I don't have any worries about that it's a mile down. It's very close, each one. We're very specific about it.
Okay, and the thing is, though, I haven't heard any discussion of compost carts. We do provide compost service, and as you are reclaiming an old landfill, you know that compost is an important thing to do with our food garbage, because there's nothing that's going to boost your methane in your landfill than people throwing their chicken bones and half-eaten cheeseburgers into the trash.
We do have a compost, and Matt's going to correct me. By the way, this is Matt Bush. It's his birthday today, so you guys don't have to sing.
Happy birthday, Matt.
He did tell me not to do that.
It's Matt Bush with Atwell, engineer on the project, 311 North Main, Ann Arbor. I could explain the compost. We've been working pretty extensively with solid waste and public works. So it needs to be one way or another. It needs to be either a dumpster, compactor, kind of your traditional one location. They have a different truck to servicing those, forklifting those up, or we need to do curbside for this area in discussion. So we're going the route curbside. Our locations are within areas that we worked with and they agreed to that their trucks will. We kind of moved a couple across the street, not particularly far, for both the trash and recycling bins that would be stored in your garage like you typically would a single family. For the compost, because we can't do a hybrid, both a dumpster enclosure and a wheel cart, we are still providing compost services for the development. They will be in a hidden enclosure, but they will be the typical 90-gallon carts or your wheel carts. People who want to utilize the composting services will have to travel a little bit farther distance, but I think people who want to compost waste from their homes, food waste, will end up doing that. So they'll walk in some centralized locations. That way the same truck can pick up the composting and go on. So that was the negotiation we worked with solid waste. And as Tim said perfectly, if in the event people aren't doing what they should be doing, wheeling the stuff out, we'll have a backup plan approved by them in which we all go to dumpster enclosures, the traditional.
And the HOA would enforce that. And that's why I dragged him out here for his birthday.
Okay. And you have more than one site for the compost, again, so that people are, because it is very icy in the winter. You have how many?
We have 2 sites, I believe. I can confirm we have 2 enclosure locations that fit multiple carts throughout just that little for sale area there. So.
Anything else on solid waste or compost?
No, I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Then we'll move on to Commissioner Weich. Thank you for indulging us, Commissioner Weich.
So thank you for the presentation. This is a really complex site.
Yes.
And I appreciate your willingness to engage this work. I wanted to start either with staff, so Mr. Khan or Mr. Leonard, to ask if the Environmental Commission, or I don't know if the city has a separate environmental department, sort of weighed in on this development. And I ask that because of the presence of the methane that's on the site. I understand from the staff report that there is a plan to mitigate it with some diversion so that it's not sort of leaking straight up. But if I understood the report correctly, in the free space, there's still going to be some potential for leakage of methane. And so I just wanted to understand, is it okay? Has someone else looked at this to say that this is going to be safe? Because I have concerns about putting residents in a place that might adversely affect their health, much in the same way that we had this conversation around putting in the affordable housing above the AATA with the bus exhaust. So I just wanted to get some sense from staff. Has that been mitigated and dealt with?
So let me start, and then if Mr. Khan wants to jump in, he can. So the city does not have any environmental standards. We do not have any locally adopted standards that decree what constitutes environmental safety, what constitutes clean soil, what constitutes contaminated soil, and the impacts of that. All of that is regulated at the state level. In this case, they will have to follow, because of the nature of the site is contaminated, they have had to do something called an environmental assessment and a baseline environmental assessment. And that is a characterization of what are the conditions on the site. And what that means is they're not only documenting that, but that starts a conversation with the state to make sure any future use of that property is done consistent with the state regulatory requirements to make sure that that property is used safely, and any safety, public health concerns are mitigated according to the state requirements. The city's role in that could be elevated because we will be having a conversation with the project team about a brownfield plan, which provides the potential for financial assistance to help remediate brownfield costs and potentially other costs. The intention of the Brownfield Act is to equalize the playing field, if you will, for a environmentally challenged site such as this with a greenfield development somewhere else. And so in the event that that proceeds, the city will engage an independent consultant that will review the work of the proposed consultant team to say, this is an appropriate response, these are appropriate actions. But I want to be clear that the majority of that is dictated by state regulatory framework. And so the short answer is any residential that is put here will have to be safe according to state standards. That's the appropriate regulatory place for that because the city doesn't have that authority.
I don't have a lot to add to that, other than the petitioner has hired a firm, a Brownfield consulting firm, who has been in contact with the county's Office of Brownfield Management, and so they are in the process of communicating about this particular brownfield. We have not seen a plan yet. Possibly the petitioner can illuminate that issue for us, and when they expect to provide us with a plan to review.
Very soon, yeah, it's in the final draft form, so that would be something we'd be submitting after this meeting. I don't really have much to add either. Brett Stunts from SME is on if he needs to speak, but we've spent an ungodly amount of money trying to figure out what the issues are here. We think we have a pretty good handle. We have worked with Eagle, so they are on board with what our proposal would be. So it's new to me too, but I can guarantee we're absolutely just as concerned as you about future residents.
I have a different question.
Any other pieces on the brownfield? Yeah, I actually have a question on that too, if you don't mind if I slip in. It's my understanding that methane is one of the worst in terms of greenhouse gases too, and I'm just wondering with the little, I just saw the detail that has the little standpipe kind of thing, and it's just kind of going up into the, I mean, I guess, if you could just describe sort of what the point of you're trying to kind of collect it and send it up in one spot sort of thing, instead of it just kind of burbling out where willy-nilly, is that sort of the point of how that
My
is set
understanding
up?
isn't much more than that, so I'm hoping Brett from SME can jump on if somebody could elevate him. There he is.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so I think as you alluded to, methane is on, we detected it on the northern portion of the site and toward the old dump area. And so we detected it at relatively shallow depths, and it's percolating up and it's migrating into the atmosphere as it stands now. So I don't think any of the mitigation that's going to go on is going to change any of that materially, but what it will do is it will prevent it from accumulating under structures at concentrations that have explosivity issues. And that's really the concern with methane with respect to people operating on the property. Like any other contaminant, we tend to, in most circumstances in Michigan and elsewhere, manage it in place to a large degree and rely upon engineering controls to ensure safety. And so that's what we're doing here. That's what we're proposing to do here. So the structures on the northern portion of the property would have vapor mitigation systems that would provide preferential pathways to the methane where they could escape to the ambient air and dissipate and not accumulate under a structure at a concentration above an explosive limit. And then we would put a trench going east-west across the site to prevent it from migrating further south. So again, not any probably discernible effect on the methane that gets into the atmosphere. The dumping was already done there, but just a prevention of, or I guess a elimination of a safety issue with respect to the development.
Okay, so in other words, it's happening anyway. You're just kind of controlling it in a way to make it safe for human habitation in terms of how it might collect under structures.
Precisely.
Okay, already.
Just a quick follow-up
Yep.
on that. And I think this is for staff. Would there be, and maybe it's just a note, Mr. Leonard, which, and I can talk to you offline about it, to just, for my own edification, to borrow a phrase from Commissioner Lee, which is, would there be some kind of warning? Because if it's in that 65% open space in the sort of north part of the development, and people are going to, and maybe kids, play in that area, and that's the place where it's sort of venting, how, I recognize that we don't have something in our code to sort of mandate that there are warning signs or something like that. So I just, maybe for the comprehensive land use conversation, if there's something that we could just earmark for the UDC, because I just am disquieted by the idea that we would have this. I understand the costs, so I'm not sitting here ignoring the fact that it'll cost $95 million to remediate the site and pull that away. I'm just concerned about future implications, and if I'm going to vote on this I need to assuage my conscience in some way. So if you could just take a note, I don't think I need a response. I'd just like to maybe have a future conversation with you about this, especially as we start the conversation around land use in the city.
Yeah, I've already got the note. I think what I'm hearing is a desire for, I think, a little bit more in-depth understanding of the brownfield aspects of this development, even though that's not city regulations. I think that'll be part of a follow-up, presuming postponement, that we will present a sort of a more full picture of what that means. In the case of that, I'm speculating here, so just like you said, we can follow up afterwards, but the reason that there's probably not a sign there is the state has determined that it's safe, because the nature of that is not concentrating in such a way that it would cause a public health concern. And that's why the focus is on those areas where if you were to put a building over that, that is of significant concern. But the fact of the matter is as disquieting as it might be, standing there in open air over this probably does not pose a significant public health concern. But we'll provide a little bit fuller picture to that.
Just wanted to add to that the petitioner is continuing to test and to determine whether pathways that are currently proposed on top of the landfill would make sense or not. And so the pathways won't be constructed if methane levels are at such a degree that they can't be mitigated and would be unsafe. And I don't know if Mr. Stuntz wants to add anything to that.
The only thing I would add to that, and Brad can as well, but it's not just methane that we have to worry about on the landfill. It's, I think, lead hits and a couple other things. So we're working on how we can mitigate that, and we may not be able to with Eagle. So we'd love to put walking paths through there. It would be open to the public. That was our original intent. Probably saw that on an initial plan. We just can't commit to it because we don't know what Eagle's going to approve. So that's still kind of ongoing.
Is on topic with this, please, Commissioner Dish.
So I appreciate that we are working within the framework of state regulations here. A brownfield agreement it's lucrative for the developer. I think this is an 11-year tax deferment, if I read the staff report correctly.
That's not determined yet.
Okay, it's not fully, all right, good. So we don't know, but it is a lucrative thing. And I think it is great to manage this methane leak so that the land can be reclaimed and used, right, which it's not right now. But I would think that it would be nice to get a little bit more out of the agreement. I would like to be able to explore what would be persuasive, what I can say at the council table. Yeah, we're adding these units, and we've got I love the multiple price points. I like a lot of what you're doing here. It means a lot, especially given the very expensive housing that's gone up in this area. So I really appreciate what you're doing. But a tax deferment is an expensive thing for residents to swallow, and so they like to see an immediate benefit. And we're mitigating the human health risks of the methane and reclaiming the site. That's big, but I think there could be more. So I'd like us to be creative about what else might go there. And yeah.
And not to cut you off, I'm sorry. I agree with you, and I think we can have those conversations. Obviously, the brownfield is a different process. Nobody pays you more because you have a passive system and you have a methane trench. This doesn't happen. This project that's why it's been sitting there, because somebody needs to understand what the environmental ramifications are and how to fix it and how to deal with it. And I think we're there, but it's not possible to develop a property like this without a brownfield. So it's not that it's lining our pockets, it's that we're able to develop on the site. So, and I know that you guys do a lot of brownfield, so you understand that, but I just want to put that on the record.
I'm really sorry if you took any implication that you were lying. It's not what I meant, but I would love to be able to offer a little bit more, even if the deferment went a little longer. Yeah, okay.
Sure.
So just for staff's edification and sort of continuing the discussion about Brownfield with the project team, particularly in that area we're talking about, it's wooded, but also the location where some of this methane might be located, to my understanding. I'm just curious from a planning commission perspective, is it palatable to lose more of that vegetation for the sake of cleanup?
I'd like to weigh in. For me, it's all about the quality of whatever it is. So if there's high quality, I don't think anything is super high quality in terms of the vegetation on this, in terms of the habitat on this site. There are individual trees that are quite high quality that are coming down, that there's some really big oaks that are coming down too. And so and when I looked back at old aerials and things like that, it looked like a lot of the site of that area was quite disturbed. But there were some things that were, so for me, if it's a bunch of buckthorn and honeysuckle, I don't care.
Okay.
But if it's something where we'd be losing landmark trees, then that's a different story for me.
Yeah, well, and again, I think that's kind of a balance that can happen with the Brownfield plan, but that's an obvious trade-off, I think, that as I'm presuming, again, I'm just sort of speculating, if there is more opportunity to mitigate more widely, even in the open space areas, it's going to be at the cost of land, so.
Yeah. Yep, go ahead, Commissioner Simmons.
Can I just ask, like, a point of clarification? I think I read early estimates about Brownfield about a 20 million and a 4 million, and you talked about the hill versus the infill that you need to kind of rescrape to prep for construction, correct? Is that my understanding, that there's kind of like two portions of the Brownfield remediation? One is the methane and the waste versus the kind of reconstructed site and stabilizing that, correct?
And maybe I'll let Brett speak again, but it's a complicated project. So yeah, I mean, the majority of it is the environmental, to deal with the methane trench, to deal with foundations for the homes that would be in that area, and then also to deal with, what am I missing, Brett?
No, I think you've got it mainly. The main issues are the methane, so the sub mitigation systems in the methane trench, and then the unstable material, that's the fill material that runs throughout the site that you can't build on. So in lieu of getting rid of that, specialized foundations that you can build on top of, where you don't need to remove all the fill material. Those are the main costs. Those are all environmental costs. And then there's some infrastructure as well that are eligible activities under the Brownfield statute. And Tim went over some of those, but some of the public fits to the project are TIF eligible as well.
So maybe just like numerically for some clarification, of the constructed, it looks like most of that area is the connected single-family homes. How many of those units are within the kind of Brownfield area of needing the specialized foundation?
So it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you can see on this. There's sort of like an angle between the 2-story and the 3-story. Darian's doing that right there.
Yep.
That is a ridge. That's about a 20-foot ridge. If you go there, you'll definitely see it.
Yep.
That is sort of the demarcation of where they filled it in with the construction debris. So that is the majority,
Like
but
a
that's not to say there aren't
70%,
other areas.
yeah.
In fact, even the apartments, there's some fill that have been used there, 5 to 7 feet, so there'll be some specialized foundations there. But that is the majority. You're right, is in that section. One of the things where we want to lower the cost of the Brownfield, that would be less, obviously, less years on that if we do that. It's important to us as well, obviously. So that is why, part of the purchase of the 2 other parcels, we'd be able to, take the good dirt from there and move that, and then we'd have open space down there. So the site plan will change. I didn't point that out. Initial plans we actually had some units along Duvarn. That would essentially be what we would plan for when we come back, when we have those other parcels. I want to make that clear, because I don't know if it was. But yeah, our plan would be to kind of utilize some of these other areas to bring those costs down, because it's important for you, it's important for us.
Yeah. That's just helpful. I'll just kind of like weigh in on my opinion that, yeah, the bias of like the Parkland, I know like New Haven, South Lyon area, they have a really large landfill with parks on
Yes.
top. So it seems stable enough that you can put baseball fields
point.
and kids are happy and healthy. But that brownfields equal, brownfield credits and things equal housing and not just kind of the open space requirement, I think is that kind of trade-off of the kind of benefits and the needs of our community. So,
Understand. And housing pays for the brownfields.
Yep.
I mean, you know,
Yep.
you can't pay it back with open space, so, I mean, it
Yep.
is kind of hand in hand.
so, yeah, those types of metrics are really helpful to kind of see the numerics of like what we're getting in terms of housing units for all those brownfield
Okay.
requirements.
We will, Brett, I assume you'll focus on that with the brownfield
Appreciate it. Thank you.
process.
And then just
Thank you.
one other thing on that for the next round, and this may be totally out there, but I'm just curious if the methane is high enough to actually like use. I mean, I know that there are programs for farms and things like that where they actually use it for all kinds of energy needs. And so I'm just wondering if there's any way to be creative about this, or if the amounts of it are just too low
That
to
was my
have it
first
really
question,
be
too.
any kind of
Brett, you
viable
might-
anything.
I think it's a great point, but Brett, I think you talked us out of it.
It's both the concentration and the quality.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we did have several conversations about trying to find some creative use to kind of recycle.
Is that about
but-
streetlights? Just
Yeah, right.
hook them up and.
Right. Okay,
Didn't
just
work.
wanted to ask the question. And one other thing that I realized that I did not handle very well, and I apologize, Commissioner Clark, you had really brought up more things about the roundabout too. And I feel like you brought up two issues and we ran with one of them and then we didn't really come back to the other. And so I'm just wondering if there's, like, what other pieces of information you would like them to cover to make sure before we move on to other things?
I guess I just wanted to know if it was really a closed door at the roundabout on both Pontiac and by Duveron, as well as design options, if there's anything that's been considered, or if there's just not enough space, or what limitations there might be for things like a slip lane to allow the bikes, just for bikes, not for cars, to get through and things like that.
I don't know if that makes sense to have your
Well,
traffic person or
Yeah,
Mr. Liu.
if I could jump in and then maybe have Mr. Liu
Sure.
jump in again. I just want to be clear, the study did recommend a roundabout for Duvarn and Pontiac Trail. So that is seen as a viable solution for that location. So I think from your question, I wasn't sure if you were understanding that. So I want to be clear on that. But the Pontiac Barton is obviously, I think, the intersection that you were most focused on. The geography of that doesn't permit a roundabout at the design it would need to be for the volume of traffic. I think you referenced some examples of some other pretty compact roundabouts. I think Luke is probably going to tell me that those are located in places which with much lower traffic volumes, and that it's not necessarily replicable all sort of layouts in any geographic space because traffic volume is a part of it. And so I think whether or not it's like a closed door on the roundabout there, I think that it's not only the geography of the space for the intersection itself, but it also at times would require wider geography, even extending along the legs of the roundabout, because you might need to have tapering lanes and the like. So I think that the door is closed on it if we are to design something within the existing right-of-way. Is that correct, Luke?
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'll follow up on that. The other reference location that's in the neighborhood, just to the south of Washington Avenue, next to US 23. So we do have a roundabout on Pittsfield Boulevard that is inside the neighborhood, and the other one is on Yost. That's not a roundabout; it's a traffic circle. And the only difference, to put it in a nutshell, is that with a traffic circle, it's much smaller, and people can make a direct left turn, does not have to go around it. So, and those were features to calm traffic in that neighborhood. So, Brad, you're absolutely correct. Traffic volume does play a very heavy role at those locations. And coming back to Pontiac Trail, maybe the conversation can look maybe another level deeper. The form of intersection could be a roundabout, or we can say roundabout is a form of an intersection. It's an alternative. What we're trying to get, the value we can get from having a roundabout is slower travel speed. And it's another form of traffic control to resolve the conflict between vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. So realizing that the goal we're trying to achieve with a roundabout is to slow vehicle down, then that's associated with not having a direct approach to the intersection. So as drivers entering a roundabout, typically there is a deflection angle to curve the roadway out and bring it back, so that when they interact with the circulating traffic, it's at a certain angle, and also slow the vehicle down. So from this regard, if we think about the intersection of Barton and Pontiac Trail, we do not really have much room to provide this feature. And the more we shrink the size of the roundabout, the less benefit we get. Because if the roundabout is really shrunk to the degree where it's just a concrete patch in the middle, that's going to allow vehicles to just drive right through the center of it. So we're having a diminishing benefit of slowing traffic down. So whether we talk about the intersection being a roundabout or otherwise, keep this in mind. And on the other side, at the intersection at Boulevard, however, we do have much more space available to put in a roundabout. And this intersection is kind of an entry point to the city. It's closer to the city boundary. It's really the first major intersection as users enter the city from the north. And on the Ann Arbor Township side, speed is higher, it's much higher, it's 45, and it's a very drastic change of the driving environment. So there's very clear benefit of installing a roundabout there at Boulevard. And I think the benefit is going to really go a long way of calming down traffic all along Pontiac Trail by having a roundabout there at Boulevard to announce now this is the city. By going through the intersection, vehicle speeds they're being forced to be reduced. And as a frequent driver and a user, sometimes I bike there too. Really coming from the north to enter the city, the general elevation is going down. So really try to maintain the speed of the driving speed. The speed where vehicles enter the city is very important. If say the southbound traffic speed is already in conformance with the speed limit there at Boulevard, then almost the driver will need to put the foot on the brake to just ride along most of the ways from Boulevard all the way to Skydale to maintain speed limit and to follow the speed limit stepping down pattern on that section of the road. So I guess coming back to this section of Pontiac Trail, the parameters is relatively more limited for Barton. But then that does not mean we have to give up or anything like that. We can actually look at other things around. Having a roundabout there at Boulevard would actually help. So maybe not in the very near term, especially if the analysis is done in a more traditional way of looking at volumes by making assumptions of certain percentage of trips still be private vehicles. So I think with all these as the background, if we can still achieve any benefit of reducing travel speed, making it more friendly for users to bike and walk and ride buses, I think we're in a very general way of moving in a positive direction.
Just ask a clarifying point. So if Barton is fairly limited. I'm just curious on why that was relevant in the first place, because the developer can't, I mean, like, unless there's just a no building any more housing, like, I guess I don't understand why the Lower Town mobility study was brought in. So it sounds like if there can't be a roundabout there, we're fairly limited. It's not really anything to do with the developer. Anyway, that's an aside. But I do also just want to give, if we are talking about Pontiac, I will say that one of the major pedestrian concerns of cars hopping the curb and almost hitting people waiting to cross has been resolved since they put in the bollards along there. So I just wanted to put a word in for the bollards and hope they stay if we are talking about that intersection. But otherwise, I guess I would say that Pontiac and Barton wouldn't really have any impact on my thought on this development in general, because it's not to one development to fix traffic.
Anybody else on traffic? No, go ahead.
At a different intersection, which is your new east-west road. Thank you for some connectivity. Maybe I'll bring up connectivity next. But there is the new development across Pontiac Trail, and you have a staggered intersection. And so maybe it's for staff first, and how that was looked at in terms of traffic from both sides of those new developments coming onto Pontiac, and if it was recommended to be staggered instead of maybe another roundabout.
We're going to turn to Mr. Liu for the answer to that.
Cool.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So having more roundabout there, if they can be accommodated, that's going to have benefit in maintaining lower speed along Pontiac Trail. So, and especially if the alignment of the driveways cannot be lined up, roundabout could be another alternative. So that's a great alternative. So, because right now, where this evaluation is being done is that we are looking at the access points from both sides. And we made some comments as to access management. We outlined some concern about safety, about how the North Sky, the cottages, Bristol Ridge, how these development access points are lined up, and also in relation to this segment of Pontiac Trail that's already widened to have a future center left turn lane. So all these parameters, they're being evaluated and being discussed at the moment.
If I could add to that, we didn't line it up with the project across the street just because that's a wetland. I mean, it just drops off. You walk there, there's no way to build. It would be ridiculous to build right there over the wetland. So that's we didn't propose that. The traffic study does not speak to the need for a traffic circle there. And I think the latest correspondence that I've seen with Mr. Liu was that our turn, I think we've kind of worked through the conflicts, but I will say there's more ongoing conversations we're having with staff. In fact, we have a meeting next week to go through some of these items. So I'm sure we'll discuss that as well.
Yeah, if you're putting a bus stop there and you have basically competing, loading onto Pontiac from two different, neighborhoods on either side, and a bus is stopped, making a blind spot, like, it just feels like a lot of things going on, especially if it's the main public, an additional public access to Leslie Park. And if this is one that construction's happening at that area, that this is actually where the roundabout can happen sooner than the one up on Duvarin, I think that's a conversation I'd want more clarification for next time, because this is where work is getting happen. I understand that it's a wetland, but there's a lot of life safety convergence here between people getting on and off buses, between people trying to get into the park, probably from the neighborhoods across the street, that I'd really want to just see another look at it and some more conversation.
Those are very fair points. Understood.
Thank you.
Any other?
Can I keep on connectivity
Keep on going.
then?
You go. Yeah.
So thank you for more connection. There, I see, can you just confirm 10-foot wide sidewalks throughout is shared for pedestrian and bicycles? in your kind of 1 mile-ish?
It's all separate, correct? Matt, do you have that information at your fingertips?
Again, we'll confirm. I believe it is a shared pathway, though.
Okay.
A 10-foot multimodal pathway separate of the road, outside the influence of the road there, that goes along the south side of the east-west road and on
That
the east
is
side
shared.
of north-south.
Yeah, there's areas where that is shared.
Yep.
Correct, yeah, and then we have individual walkways and bike paths as well.
Okay. I mean, it's a healthy width. The more you can get even more out of it, would be nice. I mean, that's where I just see kind of things converging. The one point, the more we see, individual and these private drives, you have a water main easement connection to the neighborhood to the north and kind of a not finished connection drive. Can you talk through why or when that will or will not get connected?
Yeah, so our initial conversations with the residents there, they did not want to have connection there. If you walk it, the grade is pretty steep there. So just physically getting it was going to be a major challenge to do that. So we felt, from a buildability standpoint of our project and the fact that they did not want us to connect, that is how we designed it, with no connection there.
I would love to see at least a bike path,
Okay.
right? Like if there's kids, connecting between those neighborhoods and they can
Okay.
take a bike or walk through, if not, like, great, cars can't go through, but to even that out a little bit for bike paths and walking paths between the neighborhoods
Yeah,
would be
I'm sure we
fantastic.
can't get an ADA accessible, but we will look at it to see what we can do
Yeah.
there. So,
It just adds more to the neighborhood getting to the park.
understood. I
So that'd be
I
great.
agree with you completely.
Perfect. But yeah, so I think those are the things, if we can see kind of that more connection, the wider those multimodal paths, the higher chance we also have of people kind of getting maybe to the bus stop. I see that there's 4 Class C bike hoops at the bus stop. If we actually want people to use it and get to 15 minutes or 10-minute circuits, seeing those as maybe Class A, like expanding the bus stop to have covered over those bike hoops. So, because, for some, going from the last apartment complex, and they might bike just to that, bus stop and then take the,
Which would
bus
be
the
fine.
rest of the way. So I think those are just like small design improvements that might make it more usable. If you're just kind of going through that last bits of dotting I's and crossing T's.
I know we talked about a covered bus stop there, and I'm
Yep.
not sure if ATA was wanting that or not. I know it's tight, obviously, and
Yep.
Mr. Lou talked about it, but we will certainly look at it. Those
Cool.
are good suggestions.
Those are my other things on that topic.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
On that same topic, and that was the first thing I wrote down, was what is that Stubb Street, Hunley? Totally understand if you can't do a road, a walking, biking path, I think. Like, people will make it anyway
Yep, understood.
to cut
Yeah, they
through.
will.
So you might as well give it.
Right. Exactly.
Right. But one other question on connectivity, and I agree with Commissioner Sove, the improvements in connectivity in this area are great. You mentioned, sort of opening it up, you can not only access Leslie Park, but Olson Park?
Yes.
Is there any sort of improved crosswalk situation planned, both there across Duvarn, but then also, this made me think of it when you were talking about across Pontiac Trail and people coming to access Leslie Park. Are there any crosswalk improvements at that Pontiac Trail intersection as well?
So on Pontiac Trail, I know one of the conversations, and Mr. Looney can speak to a little bit more, to have a potential crossing walk with a flashing. So, I mean, those are conversations still. On Duvarn, we're not proposing at our entrance. I think there's one on Duvarn already, a little bit farther west, to the park
I looked
entrance,
lately, but I
if I'm not
didn't.
mistaken. But I know there is a crosswalk there. And we can look at it. I don't know if getting across right there makes sense or not.
Okay,
Yeah, it's for-
But I definitely write it down and we'll look at it and get back to
okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, that's all I had on connectivity.
Commissioner Weich.
So I have a couple additional questions. One is just coming back to the electrification of the development, or the language used, I think, was electric ready. but you were concerned about heating and cooling, and so you were talking about installing gas furnaces. And I am by no means an expert in heating and cooling, but I have been learning about them, including talking to our Office of Sustainability and Innovation around what's feasible in this climate. Mr. Garber started off by talking about the efficiencies in those units. They go down to -5. I actually watched a training from 2018 from Mitsubishi, which has those units, they had them like 4 or 5 years ago. And so I wonder if just trying to understand your rationale for still installing the gas. I understand the concern that if it's too cold and then the unit is not efficient, then having the gas as a backup. But like, have you explored any other forms of energy, like doing geothermal on the site to sort of mitigate the concern that you have? And you don't have to answer it now. I mean, this could be something that, because you already noted that you're not an expert with this, but you're open to this conversation, because I think we received 15 comments directly related to this, and so I just want to make sure that those voices get communicated to you if you haven't seen them already in the agenda.
Definitely been through them. Yeah, and we'll certainly look into it further. We have looked at geothermal, and just from because of the environmental contamination, it really limits the ability to do that, and we've had our consultants look at that kind of in depth. So that's one concern. With a single family home in the out in the middle of nowhere, it's easier to do something like geothermal. Again, I'm not an expert at it, but those are the things when we talked to our consultants that they were concerned about the environmental.
Sure. And you indicated your willingness to look at this, and one of the things that is sort of necessary with these kind of units in the electrification ready is those lines being installed. So either having those in-unit splits so that they're already there as opposed to a forced air. And of course, there are conversion of units that can take a external heat pump and then, convert it into a forced air unit. So if there's anything, as you talk to your engineers or your mechanical folks about that, just so that we can have an answer for some of the residents that are concerned about this, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, and I think our intent is to really make it EV ready, so it would be, pre-plumbed for it. So I didn't make it very clear, I think, in my response, but that is what our thinking is, that it would be an easy swap out. And I know that's very easy for me to say up here at the
It is very easy to say.
Yeah, but that is what our intent is from an EV ready standpoint.
Okay, and then I just have, again, to borrow a phrase from Commissioner Lee, for my edification, you went from 11 units per acre to 8.5 units per acre. When you acquire the additional lots that are there, do you think you're getting back up to that, or can you talk about why you changed the density?
I'm not sure we were ever over 10. Maybe initially, I don't recall being over 10. I think we always tried to stay in that band.
And I understand the zoning is at 10, so if that's your answer, then that's your answer, but
I don't know. That's a great question. We're working on the plan for that now. We wanted to move forward with what we have rather than wait for the entire annexation process.
Yes, can appreciate that.
Yes, I think we can come up with a very exciting plan for that and get to about the same density.
And by my calculations, which are probably, need a second look, we're seeing 40% more parking than is required by the zoning. And so I just wondered, what's your rationale for?
I was waiting for that question.
What's that?
I was waiting for that question.
Yes, I mean, we've been slowly meandering around your site, and so now we've arrived at parking.
So, not to cut you off. I'm usually here saying we have enough parking spaces, and that, you saying we need more. So
no,
some of this is a little opposite for what I'm
working in Ann Arbor.
So noted. Really, most of those come to, and Mr. Khanna put that in there. A lot of them come from the fact that our two-story towns are two-car garage, and they have a driveway. I mean, it's a single-family home. So, perhaps those shouldn't be counted. Maybe they should be counted, but it really drastically changes the the metric there. Obviously, we want to make very certain we have one space at least per unit, and we have enough guest parking and interspersed throughout. It is important to us. I understand we don't want to have more parking than we need to. We still have the 65% open space, so we don't believe we have an issue with impervious surface, but we were not expecting that to be an issue. I understand that it is. I don't know how we can address it because, I think it's appropriate to have driveways for those types of units, and that really kind of messes up our parking calculations.
But
So-
you have, if I could.
Yeah.
You have 206 surface parking spaces in addition to the 1,284. So just, this is page 1 of site plan 1 in your parking comparison chart where you actually break out your vehicular parking. And so I think I understand what you're saying. These units have a garage, the garages have a driveway. Those two come to about 1,284, which that would be fine. But then you've added an additional 206 units of parking. And that's the overture that I'm just trying to understand. And so I wasn't sure if it was because of the old parking requirements, and so you were trying to meet those, or
To some degree,
if
yes.
it was around density, and you decided to cut back on your density, and then you decided to add parking. I just,
we don't want complaints later that there's not enough parking. So, that's always kind of how we start out. And then we want to intersperse those to where they make sense. We're also, providing, EV charging stations for the required amount for that. So I think it's important to have enough spaces to accommodate those that have EV and then don't. As part of that, I think those numbers also, we have a community center. So I think 43 of those spaces are, for the community center. So most people will walk.
They're all, sorry,
Yeah.
excuse me for interrupting. They are all delineated, so I can see where the breakdowns are
Yes.
for that. So then, my other question related here is, and this is a hypothetical, which is if the zoning environment around the development included a zone for multi-use, that is to say, we've landlocked you in this zoning island so that there's no mixed use. So you have to have a car almost in this development. But if there was zoning that created multi-use where there could be a grocery store, where there might be some other kind of amenities by the zoning, do you think that would just hypothetically impact the density here, where you might reconfigure the site knowing that there won't be as many car trips? And I'm just trying to understand, like, from your point of view as a developer, what you see in the market as the need, what you feel like you are answering as the need, and how the way we have zoned this either helps, hinders, or impedes sort of a vision that you might have for a development like this.
I think it still comes down to guest parking, and I think that is what we're trying to.
So even if we had multi-use that was nearby, and there was a grocery store, a pharmacy, a bakery, a library, and maybe even some light office, even though there is some office zoned up there, and people could effectively just subside on walking and biking, you would still be putting in this many units of parking because you wanted to check the box of.
No, I think if you're
that
down,
guest
I think if
parking.
you're downtown, it's a different
It's not?
metric.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Okay. All right. I think I.
And I would want to reserve a little judgment until we kind of look at what, maybe we'll have a different product in this next phase that we're coming, because we have had those conversations as well with it, maybe not needing as much parking for that type of product. So it's still things that we're noodling out as we finalize the plan.
Okay. Thank you so much. Those are all my questions.
Commissioner Lee?
In direct response to the mixed-use comment, which I think is a good one, right? I mean, to have some kind of amenities that's accessible by other neighborhoods can be pretty useful here. I think the difficulty gets into financing. There are lenders that are more comfortable with like one specific product type, and this just, there's a lot here. So This project is pretty complex, so to try to inject, hey, we're trying to leverage a retail component to this, just adds that level of risk to it. That makes it more complex. So just wanted to kind of address why somebody might not necessarily say, I do want to necessarily pursue a mixed use simply from that standpoint. Just kind of backing up, I think this is a brave, kind of ambitious project. So I want to applaud that. There's a lot of things here. One of the emphasis that I wanted to make, because I think the concerns of transportation and environmental sustainability are very real issues to consider here.
Yes.
On the topic of transportation, I think encouraging porosity throughout the site is important. So the question that I have, love the public connection. One of the things that I'd actually kind of encourage is any sense of curvilinearity to provide, visual appeal would be desirable. How does the acquisition of the adjacent parcel integrate to the overall site? And would you guys consider additional kind of public right or easements, public access easements? And are there going to be additional opportunities for porosity through the site that connects, Pontiac Trail to, other points of connection?
Yeah, okay, great questions. So again, I don't know, we're still working through that. I think our initial thought on it is these 11 acres to the southwest, we can incorporate that as some open space. Again, it is good soil, so there's certainly ability to use that and then kind of move that on site and then basically return it to an open space native area. But I will tell you that they're interesting parcels because if you drive down Pontiac Trail, you're going to see, well, now there's one house, but you're going to see the houses and then it drops off. And that's a wetland. So the wetland complex kind of goes through. So it really bisects it right in the middle.
Okay.
And then you've got maybe, I think, 3 to 4 acres of the upland that I'm talking about that we would use that has the good sand. So I don't know what we do there. We've talked about some kind of amenities to put there after we're done. Maybe units could go on there with, deep foundations, that sort of thing. So we're sort of working through that, but there's not as much land as I think you might think because of the wetlands. We certainly want connectivity there. We don't want it to just be a afterthought and down in the corner. We want it to be something that's usable, and I don't think we have any issues with the public using it because the public can use the entire site. So are there ways to get from Pontiac Trail through that wetland complex? We'll certainly look, and we'll certainly, I think that'd be a great idea. We just have to see how we can do that from an Eagle perspective.
Sure. Procedurally and practically speaking, when you come back to, amend the site plan, like how much time do you guys, obviously there's a lot of moving parts here, but procedurally, how would you basically continue to try and get the entitlements to this particular site plan and then come back to amend it?
It is very important for us to get this approved so we can start on this, what we're calling, it's really phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay.
But it's very important for us also, obviously, to get the approval so we can have that. In fact, we want to use some of that portion, as I'm talking about, in our phase 1 development. So you will see it soon. Okay. I know it adds complexity and confusion for all of you, and I apologize for that. But
all good.
We felt it made sense to, let's move this forward, and then as it's still fresh, we'll be able to talk about how that will be amended.
Okay.
And really what you're approving, what you may approve here would be really not affected as far as where the buildings are situated. We're just talking about, those open areas would be utilized.
Gotcha, understood. Getting back to porosity throughout the site and the connectivity, I'd urge you to take a look at kind of the county bike map to see just how some of these trails can kind of connect. I think I think Mr. Liu was talking about from the demand side of really strengthening non-motorized utilization. So, obviously there's the AAATA millage coming up. Just making sure that we're trying to strengthen all other avenues of transit down here. It is a very difficult problem to solve, as we've heard tonight. So, taking a look at that county map and seeing if there's better, more creative ways to connect to those, I think might be helpful.
That's great.
I'm kind of looking at that. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and echo Commissioner Salve's comments about the AAATA bus shelter as well. So the covered as well as the maybe more than 4 bicycle parking spaces. I think that area is critical, and that's where I started thinking about that, what about the new parcels that you guys are? At what is that planning phase and conceptualization? Where do you guys stand right now?
Okay.
So that was really the question I had. Let's see, porosity. You guys know about the minimum, we talked about parking. Let's see, would love to see grade separation for bike lanes, but obviously you can't have everything, so. And then, we talked about the mixed-use component as well. When you look at this, the nearest real grocery store, to me, looks like it's close to Nixon. Like way down on Nixon, or you're taking Green Road all the way to that. So seeing some more amenities, I think I was reading some of the comments from previously that did ask about this concept of
Yes.
the village. So village should also have more amenities than, access to groceries and things of that nature. So just let us know if there's something from like the zoning standpoint that we should be considering. And I think that's pretty much, overall, a very ambitious project.
Yes, I know.
I would like to also just finally reiterate that we did get a lot of comments pushing for, what if it's environmentally contaminated, not necessarily vertical loops, but looking at horizontal loops for geothermal. Electrification, certainly, I understand. The costs of electricity might be higher than gas. However, it should be cheaper if you're not running all of those gas pipings on the initial onset. So possibly putting that towards like the cost savings on the initial year zero, towards possibly some alleviation of the pass-throughs of utilities, because it only really counts as difficulties for the residents if you just decide to pass it through your tenant. So I understand the complexity of the performer that you're dealing with, but it is very important to this community that we've seen evinced by the comments that we've had tonight, as well as during the email. So I certainly would be remiss if I did not bring that up. So, but overall, a very ambitious project that I think would be a very good utilization or at least recycling of, as you put it, contaminated landfill property that has not been developed.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dish?
So thank you so much with your patience with, we are a notoriously thorough planning commission. And I'm actually, I don't feel like we've given you a long list of things to think about. I think that you've given us a list of things that you're willing to do. I just can't let us finish, not to say that we're done, but I wouldn't want to let us finish without saying that, if whether you are able to see your way to making this all electric, or if you stay with your proposal for electric ready and you're thinking about some other things, you could propose a conditional zoning, and that would be, for us, a better thing, and possibly for you too, because amending a site plan if things change is cumbersome and costly and builds in delays. And God forbid, if anything should happen and this site changes hands, I think we would want a lot of the innovative and thoughtful features that you've built into this project to stick with the land, because I don't think we would want to start from ground zero with someone who wouldn't understand the complexities of the site at the level that you do. So I wanted to remind everyone that you could offer us that.
I understand. I mean, obviously, we'd want to talk to our sellers because they're a big component of that as well. But I understand, and we have done them in the past, so it's something we will talk internally.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Thanks. I want to go back. I have a few more questions related to cars, I guess, and parking. The 43 spaces at the community center, and maybe this is for staff, are those required because it's a community center?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not a question for staff. I mean, I would expect that people would be able to walk or bike to this community center, so why are there 43 car spaces there?
So, yes, it would be used for the residents. And some of the areas are kind of far, so, and it's also would act as a leasing center. It would be utilized as a, I don't want to say community center, I don't want to say that, but there may be events that happen there that would require parking on occasion. So, I mean, we can look at it, as far as the number of spaces. I think we are comfortable based on some other projects that our partner DTN has done, that it made sense. It's a pretty large community center, but that was our rationale.
Okay. This slide I'm staring at says that there's over 500 EV chargers. Somewhere in here, I've seen a couple places, it says there's only 36 EV installed.
Yeah, so that's a reference to basically everything. So every unit would be EV ready. So it would, ostensibly allow for EV charging. So probably change the wording on that. That's a very good point. But, certainly not to be nefarious, but I think some of the, I think a quarter of the apartments would have a system in there. But so 36 would be for the guest use, if you will, in the parking areas, and the rest would be all internal. Every unit would be EV
ready,
capable.
or
yes.
Whatever. Yes,
I don't
whatever
know
we're calling it now.
EV or EVC on the top of my head.
And then, I'm just out of curiosity, had you considered this? I don't know how this sparked this. But this is a community. You're talking about this whole village aspect, and I have questions next about different community spaces other than the clubhouse. But have you thought about any sort of community bike share or car share to sort of reduce, people's need to own their own cars, or give a bike? People could the grocery store. It's not. I mean, it's the grocery store I go to. It's not that far from here. You could bike there in some sort of cargo bike situation.
Sure. I hadn't thought about it to answer the question, but it's something we can certainly talk
Think about it. Okay, community spaces.
Yes.
Awesome that you're doing this connection to Leslie Park. I'm seeing a lot, and you know this land better than I do, but I'm seeing a lot at the entrances of just what looks like open space.
Yes.
Is that usable?
No.
I mean,
well, yes. So the area along Pontiac Trail is the wetland complex. That whole area is a huge wetland. And we need it for the road. If we could get units there, believe me, we would. I think we could probably squeeze some. I don't think it makes sense on that main entrance. So that was our proposal there, just keep the wetland there. And then if you move a little to the east, you'll see next to the community center to the west, that's our pond, which is absolutely huge, but that is a requirement of the county. So that is.
A pond?
That's a pond,
Okay.
yes. So there's two parts of it. You've got the forebay, and then, you get the forebay and then the pond itself. So that's a big portion that we cannot build in there. The area on the north off of Duvarn, that is the area where we would be, coming back to you with a phase 3, if you will, for units. So originally we've had a couple different uses there. We've had towns over flats, and we've had townhomes. So we're still kind of working through that.
Okay.
So that would be developed, yes.
Do these single-family homes especially, do they have their own yards, or is this like a condo?
It is a condo. They do have a rear deck in some instances, and we'd probably decide to do that here, although I don't know if we've made that decision. We've talked about having some fenced-in areas that would be private for those individual users, or maybe semi-private. So that is something we certainly would want to consider there, but it is a condo.
Okay. Just as I'm looking at this and as I'm thinking about, and you just said some of these houses are a little far from the clubhouse, if there's, in any of these spaces where I just kind of see a lot of trees, but in between the buildings, there's opportunities for, small community amenities, there's, even if it's like a pocket park or seating or something like that, I think that could go a long way just to sort of creating more of those spontaneous interactions between residents.
We agree. Like our landscape plan, it's not as detailed as it's going to be, but we agree. If you look at some of our other communities, we really focus on, say, our courtyards and amenitizing that, programming it to exactly what you're talking about. Cool. So that's important to us. That's something we're going to do. Some of the areas we can't because of grade. So again, that 2-story to 3-story where you've got the hill. I don't know how much we can do there, but most definitely you will see little pocket parks, if you will, in those open space areas. That's part of our plan.
Great. And then I guess I am also not an expert on electrification by any means. I am learning. But I don't even know how to start saying this because I'm really not an expert on electrification. I mean, it's great that you're thinking about, electric ready, but you're going to install gas furnaces and people they're not going to replace them if they're brand new gas furnaces. They're just not going to do it. So I really would push you guys into looking at how you could do this immediately, talk to maybe different people. Again, I don't know who you've talked to, I don't know who, but I just feel like the answers, this is not a slam on you guys, this is just sort of like this is the industry, it's changing really quickly and there aren't a lot of people that are experts in this, and I think that the default for people is to just be like, this is too hard, we can't do that, but we can do it. It might be hard, but we can do it. So if you're gonna spend all of this money doing electric ready, like why not just take that extra step or see how you could take that extra step to not require a gas connection? And sort of to that point, actually, I did want to say before I go on to that point, speaking to just the desire in Ann Arbor in particular for electrification, I did attend the Electrification Expo that we had that our Office of Sustainability had on Friday. There were a lot of people there, and there was a Mayor's Green Fair, I think, about a month ago, and I didn't go to that, but several people told me, like, there are way more people at this Electrification Expo than there were at the Mayor's Green Fair. I think people are really, really interested in this, and retrofitting is a lot harder than just doing it in brand new construction. Let's get back to my point. Oh, did you want to say something?
Well, I can wait.
Oh, I was just going to ask about solar. Solar on the rooftops that are not just the clubhouse.
A lot of it depends on orientation, and a lot of it depends on, it's not effective on every single location. So we've looked at that. We felt that the clubhouse is a great area to power that building. So we can certainly kind of look at it again from a cost standpoint. But that was our initial look at solar. If I can go back to the electric ready, because I've been accused of being cheap many times. You're speaking in front of commissions, and sometimes I certainly am. And if you talk to my kids, they certainly would say I'm very cheap. It's not a matter of necessarily the cost of the development and the initial upfront cost. There is a component to that, and we would have to pass that on to our buyers and even our renters. And honestly, I think there's probably, again, like I said, I don't think that is the driving force for us. We are very concerned about what the utility bills will be for them. So again, if we're willing to have conversations about that, but I'm really afraid that we have the requirement and then down the street they don't, and our renters are just going to go there next year. So that is where, if we're being cheap, it's really considering our future residents and protecting them.
I mean, I do think that's where solar kind of helps mitigate that. You would have that offsetting a lot of your electric bills. I had something else in my head that I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I've just have more conversations. I'm sure we can refer you to people, not me, because I'm not an expert, but.
I appreciate it. I wrote all that down. That's good information. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. I have a couple of things.
Sure.
Just to hit that point home, you're saving by not putting the gas in, which is huge. That's a lot of copper pipe that you don't have to do. And just quickly looking up some articles in here about a group of developers in Salt Lake City that have been doing this for a while and are saying they're saving, actually, because of not doing the gas in terms of installation costs. So I get it that you're trying to balance the whole kind of renter burden versus your burden and all of that too.
Yes.
But I just would like to see more on that in terms of really,
Okay.
This is, again, I think you've heard it from all of us, where this
I
is
know I
really,
would.
this is really important. And because this is such a big development,
Yes.
it just feels like, here's our chance. And I don't know if you know much about this, possibility of us having a sustainable energy utility, and we could knock out all of that by just having gas in this one.
Yep, I do know about it, yes.
So it's like, this just feels like our opportunity. There's a rezoning here. So I get it that there's only so many things you can do that are kind of extra, right? We probably can't ask for all electric and a roundabout and a great park and, 2 roundabouts and, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I get it. There's only so much you can spend. And so we may end up having to kind of figure out what's important to us people if we're going to be able to have those conversations. For me, it's the electric. That's the big thing
Understood.
for me. Another thing is, with your parking, perhaps another way to think about it is to have places that are deferred, that you're not planting trees in them, that you're not putting housing on them. And that, I get it that you need to have some,
You're talking like
you want,
banking?
in terms of having the extra, in terms of having guest parking. Like that, you have the 2 spots in front of your garage, if you have 2 families over, but what if you have 5 families over? You're gonna need, to put people somewhere. And so there's some extra guest parking that makes sense, but one way to perhaps handle it is to have what you think you're gonna need, but then build less, but it's green, but nobody's planted a tree or put a house in it either. You're just deferring that parking so that you have the possibility, if the demand is there, that you can do it,
Okay.
if you need to. So that's maybe another more flexible way to be able to handle that. And then the other piece is with that southern portion addition that you're thinking about adding on, that that it would be kind of cool to have some sort of pedestrian or bike connection through that. There was one spot in your wetland where it got real skinny. Maybe there's a spot to kind of cross over there, and it can be pretty informal. But if I'm on my bike, I'd cut through your development. That's what I'd do. I think it'd be so much more pleasant to hop off there and then go up and then go over to Duvarin. And one thing to think about as you're reconfiguring your site plan to accommodate these potential new lots is to think about if I'm that person, and frankly, like somebody who could be biking back up to the thing, that they're going to want to cut in if they can. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the big, huge, wide bike lane kind of thing, but a way to get through. And then to have, because I see a lot of dead ends in the way that you guys have it laid out here. And so I'm wondering if it's possible, just as, again, as you're kind of thinking through things, to think about that kind of north-south connection, that you have those big blue lines. Maybe one goes all the way down, but it's not as thick. It's not like meant to be a massive
Right.
car way, but it's a pedestrian way and a bike way that you could kind of sneak through. It's like, it's fun to have the sneaky paths, right, that kind of get you through. So as you're reconsidering how you lay those areas out, maybe that's something to consider as well. I see one spot maybe where you could pop through, but it still gets cut off at the, right before it hits your main east-west road.
We looked at all of that, and we thought the same exact thing. The challenge for us was grading. So maybe there's ways we can kind of snake it through there, to your point, and maybe bike trails, it doesn't matter. I don't know, I have to look into that.
Right.
I don't think, we don't have any issue with that. It's just, we couldn't make it happen because of grade, so
Yeah.
we'll take another look at it.
Yeah, and again, like, for ADA, as long as you have, ways to get to places,
Right.
then you can do it,
Okay.
right? So I think it would be nice to be able to have that more informal
I
way
like
to
it.
get through that southern portion as well. And I think those are my only other comments in addition to what everybody else has to say. So, everyone feel like we've gotten everything said that needs to be said? Okay. All righty, so we are ready then to move on to basically do a motion to postpone, correct? Yep, okay, so Commissioner Chauvet, seconded by Commissioner Hammerschmidt. Should we do a roll call for that, Mr. Leonard, or no?
I would request that we postpone it to a date certain,
Okay,
so that anybody is paying attention, they know when this will be reconsidered. I would propose the September 7th meeting,
okay,
based on, that's going to give a little bit more than a month for resolution of all the outstanding issues, follow-up from the petition team, and you have a couple of already heavy agendas coming up as well.
okay.
So I would, that'd be fine. I think we can do a roll call, so I would just suggest that if friendly to the Commissioners Sauvé and Hammerschmidt, if I have that correct, that the items be postponed to the September 7th meeting.
Oh, one more thing here, Commissioner White?
It's just a question, because they have a ZBA for parking, and then there was something else for the sight line, or the setback.
Setbacks.
And so, if I could ask Mr. Leonard a
Sure, of
question.
course.
Does it make sense for, what am I trying to account for? I think I'm trying to account for the fact that at second reading, the potential of council not passing the parking minimums that we know they're going to, like, how does that get back to the petitioner, or is it just like a cascading thing? Because if that gets approved, they don't have to do that ZBA. And so then, wouldn't that change the petition that comes back to the table? So like, is that accounted for in what we're doing, I guess is the question that I'm asking. And
If the parking amendments are approved on their anticipated schedule, just keep in mind that a site plan is measured at the time of adoption. So if those are adopted, they will likely be adopted prior to this site plan being adopted. So this site plan will have to meet those requirements. If a variance is no longer needed because of that, then that just wouldn't be pursued, withdrawn, and then the plan could meet the requirements.
But then would they have to redo their site plan to meet the new requirement? So are we setting them up for an additional site plan revision, is what I'm asking? Everyone is shaking their heads no, so I'm going to lean into what they're saying, but I just want to ask for.
Yeah, I'll actually have Jeff address that, but in short, if their plan doesn't meet the updated requirements for EV parking, it's going to be the primary thing applicable to this, then yeah, they would have to modify the plan to meet that. None of those parking amendments are going to establish a maximum parking for this.
Right.
So there would be no requirement in that regard.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure we accounted for it, because if we're putting it to a date certain, and then that happens, but then they have to make revisions, and then we can't come back, then, because I understand this process is quite expensive for the developer, so I just want to be slightly mindful of that. Okay.
And because this is also associated with the rezoning, if the planning commission so desires, you can also recommend it with modifications or conditions that would be reflected in an updated plan set prior to its ultimate consideration by the city council.
So that's what I don't know. So like if what we're about to do will capture all of that and everybody feels okay, including the developer, then dismiss my question and we can vote. I just wanted to ask it.
What could go wrong?
Alrighty. Are we ready for a roll call?
Okay, the vote is for postponement of both motions to the September 7th, 2022 meeting. Commissioner Gabrandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner White.
Yes.
We will see you on the 7th, and with some work to do in between.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll see you in September.
Thank you.
Alrighty, we have one more opportunity for public comment. We are on item number 9. Again, opportunity for people to be able to speak on whatever at this point, anything that was on the agenda or beyond. Anybody here that wants to say, we'll call on first to speak remotely, press star 9, or use the raise hand feature. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. I'm going to skip the other part because I've already read it twice during this meeting, so I think people know what to do at this point. So is there anyone present that would like to be able to share something with the commission?
C'est moi. Thank you, Chair Gabrandel, for the opportunity. I really appreciate the fantastic discussion and the thorough review of this plan, and especially the stressing of the electrification aspect. It really is critical I have a lot to say about what I heard, but there will be another, sounds like there will be another public hearing in September. I just a quick remark. I think the petitioner knew coming in that electrification was a really big concern of the community, and I'm very disappointed that the development team tonight did not include someone who could speak authoritatively to all the questions that Commission had about it. It makes me question whether they have such a person who is up to date on the new technologies. And another reason I question that is because, the numbers that Mr. Laughlin was throwing around about utilities being 150 to 200% higher than developments across the street. I mean, he is correct that the utility costs for a development with heat pumps are going to be higher than with gas. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But 150 to 200% is just a crazy number. I mean, I've done the analysis. Wayne Appleyard has done the analysis. And if maybe this was just hyperbole, but if that's the number they're really coming up with, it's wrong. And I think we need a better analysis. Maybe they're not, what is the COP that you're putting into your equations? Are you taking into account the fact that in summer, your utility bills will be lower because you're, with a ductless system, you're not forcing cool air through the building, and your utility costs will actually be lower. All kinds of variables. I think it's, so I'm skeptical is what I'm trying to get across. And I hope we have more authoritative, definitive, and better information next time. So thank you very much for hearing all my comments. This is the third time tonight. I really thank you for your indulgence in me.
Thank you. Anybody else present? What about remote?
No remote speakers indicating a desire to speak.
All right. Okay, on to item 10, Commission proposed business. Commissioner Weich.
So this is for Mr. Leonard, and I don't know if it goes on our work plan or if we can take it just as an agenda item, but there is a panhandle that used to be a part of the zoning for M14 that's in this area.
Yep.
It is currently unzoned. And I would like to ask staff to make a recommendation for what that could be zoned. It is city-owned land, and because of its proximity in this residential area, it could be an area that we target in the community or the land use, the comprehensive land use, to make it a multi-use site, because this is where I was going, Commissioner Lee, was if this area could be a multi-use zoning, it may alleviate some of the concerns that the neighbors and the residents in this area have about getting access to amenities. And it is a big parcel of land. So a very large grocery store could go there, a library, probably a health clinic, and some other things. And so, but it's completely unzoned. And, it's right here.
Yeah.
It's right under, it's the next development down from this development. So it's a little slice that's adjacent to a park. So,
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Leonard, that was at one point going to be the official way for a safe way to have a Barton. What the Barton exit was a temporary solution, and that was the permanent solution, and the neighborhood shut it down a long time ago, decades and decades ago. And so it's kind of hanging around. But, right, exactly. But I believe that's what the history of that is, but you should, Mr. Leonard should corroborate that.
That sounds familiar. I don't.
I can show it to you.
Yeah. Happy to look at it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding there's an unzoned portion sort of immediately adjacent to Leslie, and then there's also sort of a bank of land closer to 14. Are you talking about the one eastern or western?
I'm thinking but I can show it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I guess all I want is a staff recommendation for zoning. So staff could say, let's not do anything with it until we get to the comprehensive land use. Staff could say, let's go ahead and zone it in a multi-use way right now. Staff could say, let's create a whole new zone. But this was what I was thinking about as I was looking at all these parcels, because we have, what, 10,000 units, 5,000 units of housing in this area that isn't attached to amenities. And if this, Commissioner Dish talked about, it takes a long time to get to the grocery store, and if this was zoned in a way, it could alleviate it, because what Mr. Lee said was our solution for the cars was to reduce the car traffic. And the only way we can reduce the car traffic is to bring the amenities into the neighborhood. Unless, of course, there's another way. So I think that's my request in the commissioner business, and I was all off mic, so sorry to the people who are listening.
Yeah, we'll see if they want a grocery store in their backyard or not, so. The other thing I would like to add is that I think we got an intriguing comment about bicycle standards from a resident that I thought was interesting, that we've been allowing these kind of, I don't even know what the official style is, the loopy type contiguous hoop that really doesn't conform to what we're saying we want. And they are awkward to use, and that they reference the Boston standards as the kind of gold standard. And I'd just be curious, again, not like an immediate anything, I don't think, but I was intrigued by that, because I think that as a biker, I like to see good bike infrastructure, and I find those systems frustrating as well. So I think that that's something I would just like to make sure that it was amid a whole bunch of other things about what we're talking about tonight, and I just want to make sure that that just gets put on the list for something as we're thinking about other potential, things with transportation and biking and stuff like that. So, anybody else add to the pile on? Okay.
I'm not hearing anything coming off the work plan as you're adding all this.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's
So,
right. That's right.
Okay, all right.
All righty. We are on item 11, adjournment. Moved by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Weich. We are done.
Great job with your first official meeting.